My name is Paras. I'm part of Community Folks team, and been running this for I think it's gonna be 5 years in July now. And we do this series regularly, Chronicles of Community Builders, and we try to call one of the best ones in the ecosystem, around the ecosystem, all global. So, and that's where it's Noel. Before that, Gary and a lot of other people have joined. So that's majorly it. And yeah, like community building has been one thing which I've been doing from last 5 years. So glad to have you guys here. Glad to have this community. Glad to have this tribe. And that's about it. Maybe anyone can come up if anything they have in mind. They can share. Or if I'll pick someone, then I'll say new people, new faces. I think hi Melody. Since I can see you, maybe you can introduce yourself and a little bit tell us. It's I think this is your first one with community folks in India.
You're putting me on the spot. I got the invitation too late, so I will make sure that my team member that's based in India also gets this invite. I'm actually based in the United States. I work for a company called Vistex. We're global, and we started our community last year, and it was a slow start. Trying to get people to talk to each other is not very easy.
Absolutely.
But I love to have opportunities to learn from other people around the world because we are a global company, and I am trying to gain people from all over the world. So thanks for letting me join. I think Akash sent me somebody. I feel I can see. So yeah, thanks for letting me listen.
Oh, lovely. So glad to have you here, Melody, and having more and more brand community builders and people what they're doing. It's always lovely to know, and this is what we keep on doing. We also do our monthly meetups, and which is called Retro Meets Metro, means like old community folks people meeting new community folks people, and there we discuss different problems. It's on every Friday, last Friday of the month. So you guys are most welcome. Also, do be part of that Facebook group. Also, right now we are on Facebook. We plan to see what other channel we'll pick, because not many people are on Facebook. But meanwhile, you all can join so that you don't miss an update. And if you want to ask, I think that group has, I feel that group has amazing kind of community builders, and starting from a 10 years experience to 1 year experience or even less. So it's a really good mix. So you can share your doubts, whatever you have there, and maybe that will help. Akash has put the link in the chat section.
Thanks, so, Akash.
Lovely. Anyone else want to go? Suleiman has already introduced. Karthik has already introduced. Mila, hi Mila, can hear.
Hi Paras, yes, I'm here.
Hi.
Okay, so I'll quickly go.
And if you could, sorry to interrupt. And if you could all please turn on your cameras, that would be amazing.
That'll be helpful. They'll feel like real.
I know it's quite early in the morning. I'm straight out of the bed, joined your conversation, so
no worries,
I'm really sorry about that.
No, thank you for the efforts.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. It's completely my pleasure to quickly introduce myself, so others can introduce as well. I run a community of 39,000 members. It's based out of Gurgaon, NCR. It's called Gurgaon Moms. It's one of the highly engaged and a safe online space for women. And we help them move towards their dreams and goals. It's a nurturing space. That's about me.
Thank you, Neela. Thanks so much. And I think we have met also earlier, and you have been doing this for a while. So good to see you continuing and doing things. I guess, it's very difficult. This journey is very difficult, and building community is very painful if you know the reality. And
it is.
Yeah.
But thanks to people like you, the journey is not lonely anymore. At least we have fellow travelers with whom we can exchange notes. And I think that is very, very useful.
Thank you, Neela. Lovely. Thank you so much. Who should anyone wants to? Amit, you have joined. Wow. Hi.
Yeah. Hi. Just a second.
Yeah. Show us your face. It's been a while. I've seen you, and introduce. Quick introduction.
Sure. 1 second. Yeah. Is it? Yeah. Hey guys. Hi Varaswai. Thank you. My name is Amit. I'm from Pune, and I run a community, like a social venture named Mitti Ke Rang, wherein we help women entrepreneurs from across India, from rural, urban, SHG, NGOs to list the product on the website, and we sell it across the globe. So yeah, that's what we do at Mitti Ke Rang. In terms of community building, it's been a couple of years. I'm even a solo backpacker. So we keep building community around travelers and the women entrepreneurs in Mitti Ke Rang. So that's a brief about me.
Lovely. Thanks, Amit. Good to see you, bhai. And he has been doing amazing job with women entrepreneurs and local women entrepreneurs and helping them and setting this up. Has grown from 0 to 1 and have seen the journey. So if you have to reach out to support his initiative, we keep on doing he keeps on doing that. Maybe you have to get some merchandise and get some handmade real people making merchandise for your community or something like that. You can reach out to Amit. I have also done the same thing for earlier for the jute bags, for laptop bags, which we give to our community members, the inner circle mainly, that were from his initiative. Real women, real village women have actually worked on it, and it's been it feels real. The gift feels real. It doesn't feel materialistic kind of a thing. So I think that's something. Thank you, Amit. Hi, Mila. Good to see your face. I think you have switched on, so it's good time to know a little bit about you and the community, and maybe everyone would love to know about that as well.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Paras. Thank you for that. Yeah, I don't know how I came across this community, but I am a big fan of Noele and Web3. So I'm looking to learn. I've been a builder of communities my whole life. So much so that I ended up getting a master's in organizational psychology.
Wow.
And yeah, I've been quite successful in building them. And I obsess about people's, creating safe spaces for people to be in, and just, making sure that they have a good time. So
wow.
I'm here to learn, and I advise founders on community strategies and how to build communities. So
ooh, lovely. Good to have someone like that. Vineet from from our inner circle is one of that person who has been doing this individually for a long time and working with founders, consulting and helping them. So I think people should catch up, people should meet, and
yeah.
I think that'll be good.
Absolutely.
So good to have you, Mira. Maybe someday you can come up and talk about any one good community which you have built from 0 to 1. Talk about the nitty-gritties about it, failure, successful experiments, what all you have done. Maybe we can do a session around that, and that'll be really amazing for everyone to get real time.
Yeah, that could work for sure.
Yeah, perfect. Akash, Mila, meet Mila.
Hi, Mila.
Perfect.
Just a bit occupied with the
just call and hi Pari, hi Sarah. Would you like to introduce yourself? That'll be really helpful. Everybody would know who all are here. And meanwhile, if you guys want to connect with each other or something, you can put down about yourself a little bit in the chat section. Maybe share your LinkedIn profile or something. Make the most of it. And Noele is here. There we go. We'll keep the intros for a while then. Ooh. Hi, Noele. Oh, you're mute. You're mute.
No, you're on mute.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm so sorry for running late, folks. Got a little time zone confusion over here. I apologize. That's completely my bad.
No worries, Noele. Hi.
Okay.
I've been taking your space meanwhile and engaging everyone so that nobody feels that what's happening, why nobody is talking and what's happening today. So good to have you, and myself, Paras, pleasure to have you, and pleasure to have you in the series of Chronicles of Community Builders. And Akash has reached out, and I guess you are here, and we all are super excited to listen a lot of knowledge bombs which are about to drop. And the co-host Manohar, the main host, or I'll say, because he must be here, so he will introduce himself. He will talk to you. I guess he must have already talked, and we will start this. Everyone will officially start this. So our speaker is here, and so first of all, welcome to Chronicles of Community Builders, and this is I think fifth edition of it. if I'm not wrong. And it's been 6th, and it's been amazing. Like, every time someone who has like some crazy amazing experience in building these communities, which we all are involved with, and they come and drop and like and tell us some amazing points which are really, really important for each one of us. So this series has been going great, and thankful for all of you to come and keep coming for all of these sessions. Be here, use the chat section to interact with each other, and I'll leave and pass it to Manohar. Manohar, here you go.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us on a Friday evening. And I'll be your host for the next 45 to 60 minutes, working best with Noele to make this experience something that you can look back to. I am based out of Bombay. I myself build communities. I work for Mentza, and I have an initiative called 910 Talks, where I sort of play with my own ideas and stuff. And CFK is like an important place where community managers in India come, hang out, and being associated to them. I have been getting this opportunity to interact and host these sessions. So thank you to them for having me. And we have our guest today, Noele. I think recently when I was thinking of how to introduce Noele, because I have been among the people who have followed her during her newsletter days when she used to run a newsletter. I have checked her website when she was with Teachable, I think, long back. So I think flower समझ के मतलब flowers सुन के flower में समझिएगा fire है, ऐसा अगला session आपके लिए होने वाला है. So और मैं try करूँगा कि the session is more interesting than my background. It's exactly opposite of that, so don't judge on that and stay with us. We'll try to keep it interactive, but of course we have lots to learn from Noele, and we'll structure it in the form of a Q&A. Feel free to use the chat to ask your questions. If I do something that you don't want to tell others, you can DM me also. So you can utilize that feature. And last 10 minutes, we'll have a Q&A between the audience and Noele. Till then, I'll be the guy in the room who will eat up most of Noele's time. So Noele, again, thank you so much for being with us early morning. And I mean, I don't want to do it in a cliched way. So first of all, rather than talking about your professional community management journey, would like to know a little bit more about you as a person. Where are you based out of? Where have you grown up? Where have you spent most of your time? A little bit of personal details for people with us here.
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, first of all, I am so sorry to keep folks waiting. Doesn't happen often, but I did screw up my calendar. So I really apologize for that. And I wanted to just say a very big heartfelt thank you for sticking around on me there. I really appreciate it. But yeah, a little bit about me. And I love that you're framing this question in a little bit more of a personal way instead of, it's like that first question in an interview where they're like, tell us about yourselves professionally. And you're like, oh, I'm doing this again. But I am based in New York's Hudson Valley. So I'm here, bright early with my morning coffee here. But before that, I actually lived in Brooklyn for about 10 years. And so I probably, like a lot of folks here, used to commute to an office and now work from home. So I'm sitting at my home office right now. And I guess a little bit about me personally outside of my professional life. I'm a musician. So that's actually part of my professional journey too. I started off as a high school choir teacher and then ended up pivoting into community management from then. So I'm kind of a big believer in there's a lot of crossover from not only other professions, but from other just like parts of our whole selves as people that can sort of go into professional community management too.
I love that you have given me a very elegant segue into my next question, which I was thinking, how should I ask? Like you mentioned, the place where we come from and the things that we have done in the past really shape our perspective towards how we look at community management, how we look at communities, how we think of programs and ideas. So how do you think your experience of being in Brooklyn, being in America has shaped your perception about communities?
These are really good questions. So I think that for me, when I actually think that being a musician has shaped my perception and the way that I lead communities even more, because like I mentioned, I used to teach choir, and I actually sang in a couple of choirs when I was in the city too. And being in those collaborative environments together, like choir is a team sport, right? It is something that you can only do with other people, and has really that all, like, what's the expression? High tides raise all ships type of mentality.
Yeah.
And I think some of the best choirs that I've been in have actually been ones that the conductor or even like the artistic leader does a really good job of bringing in the choir members into the kind of creation experience together. And I think that that's something that I try to hold on to as a community builder too, is I can be there to kind of give structure. I really like to think of my job as the community builder as like, I'm taking work off of the community members' plate. I'm making it easier for them to engage, but I'm still giving them the decision-making power that they want. So I'm giving them all like the fun decisions, and then all of the stuff that's like grunt work, I'm doing for myself, I'm doing for them.
I love that. I totally love that. And particularly because when we are, all of us collectively are trying to understand what is really community management, how does it manifest itself in different contexts? Some people have a bent towards recognizing it as a science. Some people consider it to be an art. Where do you see yourself on that spectrum?
Well, I'm going to become like a broken record about music, but music also both a science and an art, right? So there's like the way that you talk about the like waveforms and like breaking down the science of sound. And then there's also the collaborative and kind of creative element together. And I care about both in community building. I would say that, and Akash knows this because I know Akash really, really well. We've worked together in C School, and I'll be, apologizing to him profusely for being late too, probably for the next like 2 weeks here. So he'll be hearing a lot from me. But Akash knows that for me, one thing I'm really passionate about is like uncovering the side of community management that is a bit more methodical, because I actually think the part that's creative and artistic, community managers kind of have that in the bag already. Like each person brings that side of how they build community themselves through their own personality and through their passions. And then I think what people struggle with is like, okay, how do I measure this? How do I put this into a strategy plan? How do I pitch this in a business context? So that's the side that I'm really passionate about kind of handing over to people, because I think it's just a little harder to learn totally on your own.
I want to really assure you that your answers are really making up for the delay, so you don't have to feel apologetic. I think everybody in the room is excited and looking up to more of this conversation. Guys, just a reminder that if you feel bored of my questions and feel your questions are better, immediately put them in the chat. And if you feel otherwise, just show your cheers and support in the chat as well. Would love to see you interacting there. So now, Noele, talking of C School, that's something you're doing these days. And I believe that's something which keeps you the most busy. Tell us, how do you spend your time at C School and what are you doing there?
Yeah, so my journey at C School has been kind of interesting because I have been at my current company, Commsor, for only about a year and a quarter, building that program. And for folks that don't know, C School is an educational program for folks that want to learn community management. So it's a 3-month-long cohort-based course that folks go through if they're like pivoting into the industry. So I always like to say there's people that come from being a dentist, but now they want to be a community manager, or they come from being like a park ranger and now they want to be a community manager. Those types of people go through C School. And then we also offer that education to folks that are already in the industry. So for the first few months that I worked at Commsor, all of my work was like truly building out those products. So it was a very kind of startup-y environment. But now, a year and change into that journey, my focus is really more on building out my team and making that group of people really, really effective at continuing to scale and teach these programs. A lot of which I learned actually in a C School course. So we collaborated with Brian Oblinger to build a leadership track version of this course. And I actually got to not only like co-create that, but sort of be his student in that first round of it as well. And I learned a lot from him about team leadership and kind of how to take the program to the next level. So I would say that's where a lot of my time is spent these days.
Right. And when you think of building an education program for community managers, and lending from our earlier portion of conversation that people from very different backgrounds are becoming community managers. So how do you set that baseline course which is relevant for these people, or how do you structure them, taking their backgrounds in context and also making sure it's meaningful to them?
Yeah. And can I also just say you're a phenomenal host and all these questions are really fun to dig into and answer. Yeah. So I think one of the things that we lean on the most in C-School is the first session of all our programs is like a foundational session that's really about establishing a common language for community, which is I actually think one of the most challenging things about the industry right now is that people are using a really common set of words and language, but what they mean by those words is really different. So even taking the word community, this is something that has like meaning in culture and has meaning in our lives. Like I can say community, I could be talking about, I live here in the Hudson Valley. This is my local community. Or I could be talking about, attributes that I have, like community of musicians, things that are sort of shared among me and other people. And I think that makes this term really hard to use in a business context for people to like understand, how is my role similar to somebody else whose role is community at another company? So one of the things we do to tease that out is we use this concept of the capital C community framework, where we just kind of talk about some of the shared attributes that lots of community programs that are run by brands have. And that is really intended to help people kind of evaluate how similar their projects are to like a standard community industry project, so they can know, oh, can I expect to use the same strategies that Atlassian is using and kind of translate them into my community, and are they going to work there, or am I working with something totally different?
Right. And when you're developing this kind of a course, one is you manage communities, and this is a course for community builders. What kind of problems do they come to you with, and how do you incorporate the feedback loop in an education program?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest, there's actually 3 big problems that I think community builders have that they come to us with in C-School. So one is like buy-in, like it's hard for them to get buy-in for their projects, even from the teams that hired them, which is hilarious to me. It happened to me too, right? So it's like, I'm hired as a community manager, and then they're like, what's your job? And I'm like, I don't know, you tell me, like you hired me as a community manager. Speaking of kind of last roles. And I think that's something that a lot of folks experience in their roles. So one of the things we try to equip them with is just like how to talk about community management confidently, like how to talk about this in a business setting. Like you're going to a meeting, how do you make your project sound compelling and do that storytelling? So that's one side. Then I think something that ties into that a lot that's been surprising for me is just like imposter syndrome. So I think a lot of folks come in with a lot of really strong ideas and skills in community building already. Like Akash is a great example of this. Akash is already an awesome community builder coming into C-School. And I won't like speak for you, but I think one of the things that's helpful to get out of it is just like the validation that other people are doing this, and they're doing it in a similar way, or they're kind of talking about it with you and digging into your ideas. And then the third thing is a little bit more kind of nuts and bolts, and that's just measurement. People struggle with like metrics and measurement. And so that's something that we teach in C-School in a pretty concrete way.
Yeah, I'm so fascinated with that answer. And I think it really gives me a perspective, and of course, a lot of other people, that education is not only about the hard skills of it. There are other aspects in your career where you feel the need, whether it is validation, whether it is other things that you mentioned. I love that. I love this answer in particular. But since I have bored you with very intense questions, let's talk about hoodies. I read on your blog that you're a huge hoodie fan as well. So what is your relationship with them, and what is your collection like?
With food?
Hoodies. I think I read on your blog about hoodies.
Oh, like what I'm wearing right now?
Exactly.
Do I have a collection of hoodies? I would say mostly I steal a lot of my boyfriend's hoodies, and he gets annoyed at me and says, like, why are you wearing my hoodie? Please put it back. But this is actually mine. So that's my main relationship with them. Wear a lot of soft clothes.
Right. And relationships for a community manager are something that I think that's probably the most important metric to measure. But how do you really quantify it? How do you really measure it? It is definitely a key challenge. So what would be your advice to people who think of measuring communities? What is your go-to mantra for that?
Yep. So for me, I think what's most important is actually knowing what your company already measures, and then trying to connect community back to that. So I think that taking a look at relationships can be important in terms of like evaluating the health of your community in itself, but it doesn't say much about the value that the community has for a brand, which is, not relevant in every situation. Some communities are just communities of interest, like they're there for only for us to build relationships, and that's totally fine. But a lot of the community builders that I talk to are doing this professionally, so they have a need to like justify their job. And so I find that the best way to do that is actually just to like look at what your team is already reporting on. And a good place to look for that is like, when my financial officer stands up in all hands, what is she talking about? Like, what metrics is she telling us about? And can I connect community to that in some way? And I'll give an example of how I did that at Teachable. So one of the things that was really important for the business at whole was retention metrics. So things like reducing churn or increasing lifetime value of members. So then what I did was look at my cohort of community members versus my non-community members who were customers, and just compared them across those metrics on a month-over-month basis. So looking at, is there actually a difference? Like, do community members stay customers for longer? And those types of things, when you can tell, they did. Actually, spoiler alert, they did stay customers longer. So it was a positive outcome. And when you can tell that story, you have just a really strong place to come for in terms of advocating for your program, because you're actually impacting the bottom line.
Right. I'm letting that sink in, and I think I was really looking forward to the conversation, and I'm so happy that I'm getting to do this. I have more questions for you. But before that, I have a proposal that should we take a group picture at this moment so that some of the people who are about to leave or want to leave can also be part of this. So Akash, Paras, you can change the mode, I think, from spotlight to the group, and probably I'll request people to turn their cameras on if you want to. That will be really great. And let's have a group picture. And I think maybe it goes against the norms usually, but hey, today's session is about breaking the norms. So let's do that.
Yeah, people quickly, cameras on. Let's do a morning selfie.
See everybody's face.
Shinma, Swara, Pari.
Yeah. I'll show my face, guys, but you will have a fun time. I'll make sure seeing my face.
Still writing.
I've done something crazy, guys. Yesterday only.
Bhagta bandar nahi ban gaya aadmi.
No, dude. This is the thing.
Full on postal vibes.
Oh,
lovely.
Postal vibes,
Lovely.
guys.
Lovely.
Okay.
Good to see you. Let's do Suleiman, Sarah. Can you guys just switch on, because I think just two of you who's not there, we can have a like full lengthy pleasured family picture.
I thought Charish was here.
Cherish has.
Okay, on three, let's say community.
Okay.
I'm not saying anything. 1, 2, 3.
Community.
I think I was the most boring one.
Yeah, we need Noel. What can be any another word for this? Like, which can show, like, people go blast with that while saying that word, and we can capture that rather than cheers. What it
I was
be?
going to say cheese, yeah, because that's my dog's name, but I don't know. Community folks, I guess.
It's like, I've tried that. While saying it, like, the expression doesn't come. So we need like something like, crazy to capture these photographs, and not cheers, because Yeah, everybody does that. That's why that's why I thought, like, maybe ask the expert. Manohar, maybe next time you have to find a word for all of us. And yeah, that's a right assignment to the right person. Carry on.
Definitely.
Thank you, people. Thank you for the photograph.
All right. So these kind of things, right? Taking pictures, when you come together, you try to create a sense of togetherness, belonging. These are very complex and abstract ideas. And when you spoke about the idea of buy-in, often the people you interact with come from a very different tangent of numbers. Then in your course about enabling buy-in, how do you help people negotiate or navigate this conversation about the intangibles that folks from numbers?
Yeah, so my advice is actually just to not focus on the intangibles. And I don't know if that's satisfying advice for folks, but it is what I find has worked. And all I mean by that is that when you're coming to somebody who doesn't inherently already believe in, there's value in belonging. So I actually think, and maybe you can let me know in the chat where you fall on this, and also questions welcome in the chat. But if you are a community manager, you already believe that there's value in belonging and connecting to other people. That's something that's like part of your belief system that you come to the job with for the most part. But like you mentioned, when you're talking to your boss or you're talking to a CEO, they don't necessarily have that same mindset. And I found that trying to teach someone that mindset is, I don't want to say it's impossible, but it's going to take some time. It might not be the best investment of time versus sort of coming to them and trying to speak their language and helping them understand the elements of community that are valuable to them and the way that they already see the business. So that's why I really recommend kind of choosing metrics that fit into the narrative that your business is already telling and using those to kind of prop up the work that you do. That doesn't mean that you don't focus on creating belonging. It just means that it's not necessarily what you're reporting on in order to advocate for your program.
Very practical and very useful advice, I must say. And thinking of executive education, while majority of education is focused on community managers, does C-School already have or wants to explore creating educational program for founders, for other roles which have to work with community builders, or they have a focus on community as a business?
Yeah, so I mean, we've had some founders go through C-School. So when founders are really deeply engaged in building the community, and this happens like most frequently when they're building a community first, which we're seeing like more and more in the industry, that founders are like creating a community and then they're using that space to kind of validate what product they should build for those people based off of like co-creating those ideas together, which I think is a really cool model. And there's a newsletter that talks all about these instances that I think is called Build with Community. So we have founders like that will come through C-School, but we haven't built a track that is like specifically for founders yet. And I think that's just because for the most part, they will hand off that work within a year. So we're really focused on those individual contributors who are working on that as their full-time role. Yeah.
Right. And I want to assure people dropping their questions in the chat, will definitely take them. None of them will be ignored. Just give us some time, but keep the questions coming. It's great that we have them in the chat. So Noele, these days, what do you think is the most interesting thing happening in the community space globally?
Oh gosh, the most interesting thing.
Well, let's say 2 or 3, as you like.
I think something that interests me a lot about the community space right now is sort of the switch from hobby communities to like professional communities. So an example is, I think there's a lot of people that have been doing community work basically for fun because they enjoy like moderating a Discord server. They like kind of building a community for folks that have the same interest as them in like gaming or learning a language. And I think it's been really cool and gratifying to watch space being made for those people to like get paid and take those skills into a business setting, which I think a lot of folks like want to do. I was just talking to somebody yesterday who was talking about like Discord, how a lot of Discord moderators are like Gen Z, or they're on the younger side. And I think it's just like really cool that you could have your hobby as like somebody in your late teens and early 20s, and then be like offered a well-paying job at like a tech company to do that same thing. I think that's cool. There are other things that I think are cool that are happening in community. Oh, I guess like one that's really obvious, but that I actually think is really fun is just the fact that different brands that used to be really focused on support communities, like that used to be the most common instance of a community for a brand. And again, because they're really easy to track against metrics that businesses already care about. So like, that's why people were investing in them. But brands are starting to care about like shifting those into community of practice, which I just find really cool, like making more space for people to connect over those intangibles versus more kind of transactional conversations, which is really awesome to see.
And to make this conversation a little holistic, while I asked you something about what you find interesting, I also feel compelled to ask you what bothers you about the community space, or is there anything that concerns you?
Anything that concerns me about the space? Concern, I think it's in a growth space. So like, always just keeping an eye on it. I'm not necessarily like concerned, but I do think one of our pitfalls is, like I talked about common language. I think that's a potential pitfall. So community being more of like a trend than something that's actually adopted. So something I see sometimes is folks that I've known for a couple of years that have been in the community space, and then their companies are like removing their community team, or they're deprioritizing community. And I think that sometimes it's a little worrying. It speaks to companies that are like wanting to hop on the community bandwagon, but they don't actually have an understanding, or they're not willing to like let it play out or invest in their community folks. So I think that's troubling sometimes.
Yeah. And since you engage with students from so many diverse backgrounds, not just professionally, but also geographically, and this may be a little far-fetched question, it may not be required, but just to hear your perspective. Do you feel that people coming from Asia, Africa, or other parts of the hemisphere, do they need a different kind of an education than community managers in US and Europe? As a program designer, what are your thoughts on the approach towards that?
Good question. I mean, I think like everybody needs a slightly different education and community, and some of that just happens in your specific role. So I don't know if that's a totally geographic question as much as just like every community instance is going to be slightly different. I do think there are trends in different geographic markets, so of like how companies in those areas view communities differently, that might warrant like specific education in different places. But I wouldn't necessarily like be the expert on that, because I'm only the expert on my own market that I've particularly worked in. But I would also say it just depends on the goals. So I see a lot of folks that are international that are like coming through C-School because they're looking for a job at an American tech company, in which case the skills that we're teaching are like super applicable to those types of instances. But I think it really depends. It's just like one of those things with the global remote, like Commsor is a global remote employer. A lot of companies in the US are hiring like all over the world. So I think that changes the market a little bit.
Right. And you also used to write your blog, which I'm not sure is currently active. Is it, or you have sort of given it a pause?
Oh gosh, called out. I don't know if I would say that it's like intentional.
I called out because I was a subscriber, and when I was looking for Noele, I said, "Oh, this newsletter has stopped. Why?" Now I have an opportunity to understand.
So I think what I would say is that before I came to Commsor, I was working on my blog really part-time. So I was writing it like after work while I was at Teachable, and just kind of using it to think about community management, which was not like explicitly my job, right? I was a community manager, but I was not like there to do thought leadership about community management. But at Commsor, that is like my whole job, is to create content and like engage in the community space and have conversations about this. So I'd say it's not happening on my blog, but it's still happening through C-School or through the Commsor blog. So I would even say I write a lot for the Commsor blog.
So that's the place to follow, is what is.
Yeah. For now, yes.
And since you have transitioned from multiple jobs and it's been a while since you have been in the community space, what would you advise a young community manager, or rather anybody who is trying to identify the next job for themselves? Because often there is misalignment, the job descriptions are kind of not really matching the expectations, or once you sign up, then you get surprises. So how do you evaluate a possible job prospect for yourself when you choose that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is a really big question, because the interview process is, there's a lot of different aspects to it. I think from the job posting itself, when I'm evaluating a job posting to decide whether or not to apply or whether to recommend somebody going through C-School apply, I'm really looking for words in the job description that not only indicate like an understanding of what community is. So one thing I'll always look for is like, do they describe the community instance? So most kind of capital C community programs, if they're posting a job for the community manager, they'll like explain what the community is. So they'll say like, for our community of 2,000 members of our software who are congregated on Discord. So it's like really crystal clear what that instance is just from a few words. So I'm looking for that. I would also be looking for words that indicate kind of strategic ownership. So I'm looking for an emphasis away from just, you're here to moderate or you're here to oversee. And I'm looking more for words like strategic ownership or content creation or facilitation. So I'm looking for a space for the community manager to actually like flex across their entire skill set versus just being seen as like the gatekeeper who comes in and like deletes posts basically. And the reason for that is not because I think moderation is not important, but just because I think that there's more opportunities for people to grow into senior roles when they have a more like well-rounded skill set as a community manager.
Right. And despite my best efforts, I might have tried to cover a variety of questions, but still, Noele, is there something that I have missed and you want to share with the audience? Would love to hear. Just for the lack of a question, I don't want it to get missed. So please.
Gosh, you asked so many good questions. I actually feel like this is one of the most fun Q&As I've ever done because your questions have been so interesting and varied. I think I want to kind of help folks that are asking questions in the chat.
Sure.
I see that Mila has a hand up.
Let's do that. Let's do that. So we'll take it in a sequential order in the interest of first come, first serve. So I think the first question that I see is from Karthikeyan. So if at any point I'm able to not able to decipher the question, I'll ask you to unmute and please ask your own question. I think this one is pretty simple. It says, Karthikeyan asks, how do you standardize training community managers when the audience are disjoint completely? For example, someone with high attention span and low attention span. You have been a teacher, Noele, and now building a program. What is your take on this?
Yeah, so I'm actually not sure whether this question is talking about like, how do I teach people with those different attributes, or like, how do I teach community managers to manage groups that have different attributes? But I guess I'll say both. So the first side is that in kind of educational content creation, we put a lot of effort into creating content that has different modalities, so different ways in. And all I mean by that is like, there's visual components, there's listening, there's doing, there's like experiencing real situations, there's making up fake situations. So you're kind of getting into the different ways that people think. And that's like something that's standard across. I did that when I was a high school teacher too, and I do it now. Like, spoiler alert, adults are no different than high school students in terms of how they learn. Like, everybody's exactly the same. Kindergartner, 99-year-old, like everybody's the same. And then on the side of like teaching community managers to manage different audiences, I think that just comes down to, I'm not actually telling them what to do. I'm telling them how to strategize. So I'm telling them like how to make those decisions, not like, here's the exact playbook to use with this set of people. Because I agree, like that would not work.
Right. Moving on to our next question, Shreya asked Noele if you could enlist skills that help with good community building, both soft skills and technical, especially from a methodical point of view. What skills those would be?
Yeah, this is something we talk about in C-School. I'm trying to think of like what the best way into this is. The work buckets or the skills themselves. Well, I guess I'll start with the skills themselves. So one that's obvious is communication, but the way that I talk about this in community is a little bit different. So every job posting is going to say communication is a skill, whether you're looking for a community role or like a web developer role, or but you're trying to be a doctor. Like everyone wants you to be a good communicator. In community though, what that means is you can communicate effectively in the style that's native to the community. So what I mean by that is some communities are really formed around like live video, like that is the main way that you're going to be talking. And in that case, you're looking for somebody who's like a strong facilitator who has public speaking skills. Other communities like a Slack or a Discord, you may be looking at something that's like only short form copy. So then you're looking for people who can write concise copy. So kind of translating what communication means in different instances, I think is one part of it, and knowing where your strengths are and applying to roles that like match the communication style that you are good at. So that's one side. I think another big one is being a generalist. So being somebody who's, I think a good way to describe this is like T-shaped. Like you have really deep skills in some areas, but you also have comfort touching on lots of different skills in a more kind of broad way. And just the reason for that is that when you're a community manager, you're essentially like a product owner. So you are like running a program. So you have to be able to touch on like the logistical side, the actual people-oriented side, the like planning side, all of these different elements of the job. There's a lot. I can keep going.
Certainly, there's a lot, and you're the right person to talk about it. So we have Myla raising her hand. Myla, why don't you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Thanks, Manohar. It's Mila actually, but great to be in this space, and thank you, Noele, for doing this. I'm a big fan of Commsor. My question is around exit to community. We're seeing more of those pop up. Essentially, it's if a company is not poised for IPO or acquisition. So I just thought I'd ask you what your thoughts are on it. What are you seeing as the sort of the positives or negatives about it?
And just to clarify, what you mean there is community members buying the company?
No, it's getting sort of the return if they're being acquired for the sake for I guess acquiring a community, like a bigger company acquiring another company for the sake of the community. Yeah.
So the example that I'm just trying to distinguish between, so there's actually like two kind of similar trends happening in community right now.
Yeah.
So, yeah. The one that you're talking about is like a good example would be like Zapier and MakerPad.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So just for folks, what I'm talking about, there's a community called MakerPad that's hosted on Circle that started off as like a community of practice for folks that do no code development. And then they got acquired as a company by Zapier, which is a like no code tool. Everybody knows it, I think, at this point. What do I think? I mean, I think it's a good option. I would be happy if my company got acquired by Zapier, not Commsor, but like if I had built a community, I would be happy for that. I think it's really similar to like how Venmo got acquired by PayPal. Like it's a market expansion tool. It's something that is a good option for a company that doesn't have like a monetization stream in itself, but then can become like a property of another company. I mean, I can see why Zapier they could have built something like that themselves, but they didn't have to. So I don't know. This is maybe not the most insightful. I think it's cool. It's an option.
Thanks.
All right, so we have more hands, but I'll just honor the chronology a bit and keep taking one hand and one question from the chat to keep balance between the introverts and extroverts at the same time. So the question we have in the chat is from Adarsh, and it's kind of a long question, so I'll try to crisp it up. But I think I cannot undermine the merit of the question or the value it has. Adarsh is trying to know if the choice of people to become community managers, this newer trend of different people becoming community managers, is not only driven by professional success, but also personal need, the kind of situation we are in, the kind of societies we have become. So do you think it's driven by a personal need for community managers also when they talk to you? Adarsh, please add if I have misunderstood your question or understood that.
So
Okay.
I was basically trying to understand from a fundamental point of view, because communities can be from the perspective of both as a consumer or part of the organization or the employees that you have. And in both the spectrums, when you isolate these cohorts, your identity of the community or your perspective towards how you're going in the professional life will also diverge. So I just wanted to understand, in the norm, how is it? It's more of a personal choice, or is it because it's going to be one of the feathers that is going to add up in the professional career as it is? So I just wanted to understand, where does this fit?
Does that help, Noele?
So I'm not sure I'm totally understanding. I think this is like a big idea. So I think there's a couple of different potential questions in here, but am I on base if I'm understanding? You're asking like, to what extent am I bringing my whole self to work versus like curating a version? What's the angle here?
So how are you distinguishing between what is it that you are building the community for, and how is it that it parts a subsequent, aspect of your life in general? Because that sort of is one of the reasons why the kind of switches that are happening across the board in industries, because of the job skill proliferation that is happening. So within that, how is community building as a space shaping up? Is it more on the professional lines, or is it more driven by your personal choice of things?
That's an interesting question. So for me, I've only done community. I'm not one of the people that got into community from doing it as a hobby. So this is not something that I have ever done in like a non-compensated way. And my first big community role was for a brand. And for me, I am a big believer that where communities can thrive in a brand setting is in the overlap between the objectives of the members. So like why the members are there. Also, I guess the community manager, in a sense, like why they're there and what the brand is looking to get out of the community. So that overlap in that Venn diagram is where the community has like potential to thrive. But I would say, for me, the majority of my expertise does come in those kind of like monetized, compensated community instances versus like the Discord manager coming into a professional environment. But I mean, I think it's both. I think we're going to have to wait and see, to be honest.
Right. Makes sense.
So we'll move on to the next question. We have the question from Karthikeyan again, I think. It asks, do you foresee companies investing in specialized training for their employees to understand fundamentals of community building?
Yes, that is, I mean, I have to see that because that's the business model of C-School. So yes, I do see companies investing in training for community managers for sure.
And thinking of buying, Shreya has a question where she asks, what metrics work best in convincing a buy-in?
Yep. So this is kind of hearkening back to what I was talking about of looking for the metrics that your company is already tracking and then finding a way to connect community to them. So this is a little bit more, I think, abstract, because when we measure communities, we immediately look at like, okay, how can I measure what's happening in the community? And that's what leads us to engagement metrics. Like we're looking at, oh, how many likes, how many comments, how many visitors, those types of pieces of information that are sort of describing what's happening inside the community. But the impact of kind of storytelling that you want to do for businesses on the relevance of community is actually not about that. It's about the impact of being in the community on business metrics. So those things could be retention oriented, they could be acquisition oriented. So you could be talking about how the community helps you gain new customers. They can also be about how community generates content, and they can also be about how community is a source of research. So all of those are different angles into talking about like real bottom line impacts the community can have. And that is where I would start, is with those type of metrics.
Right.
One other piece of color I'll add to this. You're actually not going to be able to start with metrics because you always need to start by doing before you can measure. So you're not going to be able to like show. I would never have been able to come to Teachable and say, hey, let me build a community because it has this impact on churn or retention, because it hadn't happened yet. So you come from a place of communicating the hypothesized value and sort of leaning on case studies. So you're like looking at other examples. This is how this company has used community to impact retention. I think we can reproduce that here. That's the story that you're telling. And then the measurement actually comes later.
Wonderful. I think this is a brilliant hack, and as simple as it sounds, I think it's a really deep insight. I personally find it very interesting. Before I have one question, but before that, I would like to invite Akash to ask if he has any questions, to just acknowledge that while I am the face, but he has done the back-end work for everything to make this possible. Though he has been quite quiet, I know that he has some questions. So Akash, why don't you go ahead?
Actually, Pari has her hand up.
Oh, sure.
Right, so let's take her.
Hey, Pari, please go on.
Thank you. So Noele, I think I'm a big fan of yours. Like the first thing I wanted to tell you is like I'm a very, very new community builder. And when I was actually searching for resources, I think I fell upon your blog, like Manohar mentioned. And I think the engagement ladder is something that was really useful for me. So thank you for that. Like, I think my question echoes a lot of questions over here, and I think you already answered it earlier. But again, it was about how do I actually measure the value that my community is actually giving to my members? Because as we know, 95% of the members are always lurkers. They don't really like either like or comment, but I see that they are at least entering the community, but I'm not sure if they're getting anything out of it. So that is one thing, like, there's my management keeps asking me, like, even though I have the buy-in from my management, like that's how it started, but it's so hard for me to measure value. And how do I tell them that, okay, it's actually valuable or not when I'm not sure?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think I'm going to tell you a similar thing. I mean, just to kind of rephrase too, this is a question not about like the impact the community has on the business itself, but like, how do you quantify what that is for the members? I think the most common way in the industry to do that, frankly, is through NPS. So people will use those kind of 1 to 10 style scale questions to ask about how likely people would be to recommend. That's common. Honestly, I don't know why. I've never been like sold on, and it's never been a compelling narrative to me, this 1 to 10 scale, but it is a common way for people to measure this. What I would actually look at is, when you talk about impact, can you define like what those things are based off of what you built the community for? So for example, in the community that I built for Teachable, the impact that the community members were asking for were things like, we want to grow our businesses. We want to learn more about entrepreneurship. So those things were not just about like, how much do they like it? It's not just about like, do they enjoy being there? Although that's also important. You can ask about that too. It's like, is it actually pushing them to the next level? Are they learning? Are they getting to that next stage? And I think one way to do that is to try to like map out the user journey that you're trying to produce through the community. So like in the case of Teachable, it might be create a course, make a first sale, ease down your hours at work and replace it with your online business. And then you're seeing whether being a part of the community is pushing them along that journey faster. That's probably what I would be trying to measure.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. That helps.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
And high five Pari for mentioning the engagement ladder, because that's what my question was about. That I have also read that article, and why don't you talk a little bit about that ladder, Noele, for all others who might not have read it?
For sure, yes, and thank you for reading that blog post. It's so funny. When I first read this blog, I really did not think, I was like, nobody is going to read this.
I also like the other one, why Facebook groups are not community, but I will just keep it to the engagement ladder.
Yeah. I know I've been a little salty on Facebook groups on my blog, so for my formal apologies to Facebook groups. But yeah, so the engagement ladder is really just like an idea about mapping level of effort that your community members have to put in to engage, and trying to intentionally vary what you're asking them to do. So all I mean by this is that when you're in a community space, it's normal for there to be lurkers, it's normal for there to be super users, it's normal for there to be everything in between. And I think that one of the ways that we can help people kind of escalate the way that they engage in a community, if they want to, they don't always want to, and that's fine, is just by providing more different ways for people to engage. So a lot of communities will like rely really heavily on one form of engagement, like they mostly ask questions or they mostly do live events. And I just want to point out that live events are high effort. Like it took a lot of effort for you all to like show up here. You had to like mark your calendar. You have to maybe like reschedule a meeting. You have to, I don't know, like sit down in a quiet place in order to get here. And that's not something that every single community member can do. Some community members can like vote on a poll today, or they can respond to a question. And so the engagement ladder is just a way of imagining that if like responding to a question is here and attending an event is here, well, how do I like climb between those two things? Like, what are my options to start to accelerate how I engage so that I can increase my persona basically from lurker to super user in a space?
Brilliant. I think I personally love that blog, and thank you for sharing that. Hope to see you more on the Commsor blog and other places on the internet. I think for today's conversations, we have given people enough food for thought, and might not be a surprise if people skip some weekend plan and spend their time reading something on the internet on the weekend. That would be a really good impact. Thank you so much, Noele, for sparing time with us. And I think each one of us loved the conversation. We have already exceeded a little bit more than the promised time, but I think people have stayed back with us. Thank you, everyone. And in the next edition of Chronicles of Community Builders, we'll have a new guest, Akash, and Paras will keep you posted on that, and keep an eye on the Facebook group also. But Noele, any last words?
Just thank you so much for having me. I'm really actually impressed by this community. You've done a phenomenal job building this space. Akash, Manohar, Paras, I really, really appreciate you having me here. And thank you everybody for coming to this session. I hope that we'll stay in touch. I'll see you on the internet. You know where to find me. I have a unique name, so if you type it in, you'll find me in all the places.
Yep. I've already done an update, tagged everyone on Instagram. So my part is done already, done and dusted. And I think thank you so much, Noele. Big claps for you. Then big claps for the host, Manohar. I'll always be in love with the way you host. Like, you're amazing with your words, like I always say. And a lot of claps for everyone for joining. You should clap for yourself too. You made it on a Friday evening, and for you it must be morning, Noele. But yeah, for here it's evening. The whole everywhere. It feels like something is happening, and only I'm working. I'm sitting here. So it's big claps for everyone, doing a great job. And then our boy Akash, who is pulling it off like anything and doing so many things at times. So really grateful, Akash, to have you around. And and then everyone, Karthikeyan, Shreya, Adarsh, Sarah, Vineet, thank you for staying back. The last what we call that, Akash? Last survivors.
Last
survivors. We call it every meetup. Whoever left in the end, we call them last survivors, because that's very few. A lot of bunch joined, but a dozen of people stayed in the end. So welcome to the last survivor kind of a thing, and you guys have a good rest of the day, evening, and weekend. And yep, that's about
Thank
it.
you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Noele,
Thank
for
you,
coming
Noele.
in.
Goodbye.
And thank you, Manohar.
See you online,
Thank
guys.
you.
See you somewhere online. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Ta-ra.